Hello, everyone. Good day, good evening, good night, wherever you are. Right now, it's about 2 p.m. in the afternoon where I am, and it's the late evening, and I'm so grateful she's willing to, have a late evening here with me on my channel, Directing with Saga. I'm PL Stewart, and today, for me, I have a fabulous, fabulous, fabulous author. This beauty, which was an incredible book, Sunday Times bestseller, I believe.
It
Is that
was,
correct?
yeah, it was, yeah, very surreal.
Congratulations on that. A Song of Legends Lost. And today I have the phenomenal author, MH Ayinde. MH, thanks so much for
Thank you
joining
so
me.
much for inviting me on. Really excited to chat.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you. And we already have some fans, I believe, in the chat. Albo878, thanks so much for coming up. Take the amplified and the reversal and smash together. Does two different infinities to create imaginary mass, imaginary technique, hollow purple.
Yes.
He says. So, um, so I had the privilege of meeting you in Glasgow for
Yeah.
WorldCon. And yours, one thing I have to say, I can't help it. My wife and I both said, yeah, I mean, just one, she's such a vibrant, exuberant, just positive person, and you just get that vibe when you meet someone's like, yeah, the writing is gonna be amazing, just from speaking to you and how intelligent you are, articulate. And sure enough, then I had to wait. I ordered it. I pre-ordered this, and I had to wait for a while, especially in Canada, to get it. But wow,
Oh,
was it
thank you so
spectacular!
much.
This is
Thank
amazing.
you. And thank you for pre-ordering it because you know how important pre-orders are to authors. So I really appreciate it.
Now, this is making the rounds. It's been a bit of a book tube darling as well. People such as the brothers Gwyn and Leo Patrick Leo have been giving this a lot of too. So, and of course, as I mentioned, Sunday Times bestseller.
Thank
Congratulations.
you.
So, how are you? How are you enjoying all the success?
So I'm enjoying it a lot at the moment because it took me 18 years to get here. I had spent a lot of time struggling with my confidence, and it took me a long time to get. It took me 4 books to get an agent. Um, I mean, when I started out, I didn't even know that indie publishing was a thing. I don't know how different it would have been if I had. But it was a long road for me, so I am really enjoying finally getting to where I've spent what feels like a lifetime trying to get to. It's also very surreal, so I'm trying to balance the enjoyment with all the anxiety that comes with being perceived, because you know a lot of us writers are introverts and we don't like being perceived, and just sharing my words with other people because you know you write to communicate, but at the same time it's really deeply personal, so it can be very scary having your words out there. I read, I wish I could attribute it to the person, but someone was trying to sum up what it feels like bringing a book into the world, and they said, here's a piece of my heart, now rate it 1 to 5. And that's basically what it feels like. So yeah, so I'm enjoying it, but there's a lot of fear there as well, which I need to try and get over.
No, I completely understand, but I don't think you have anything to worry about. This is absolutely brilliant. But I do want to touch on. So you mentioned your writing journey in terms of the business side, to get an agent, to get a book deal. So what was that like? You said you've written a couple books before,
Yeah.
but you hadn't latched on. Can you expand a bit on that? What was that
Yeah,
all
when I
like?
start telling people about my journey, it is quite ridiculous when I look back on it. So yeah, when I say I wrote 4 books before, I completed 4 books, and 4 of those books I sent to an agent or or more, but I wrote a lot more than that I just ended up scrapping. And basically, the first book I wrote, I sent it to one agent, and I got a very nice rejection. And I was like, oh, so that means it's rubbish because I got a rejection. So I'll put it in the bin and I'll write something else. Which obviously, no, it was literally one agent I sent it to. And that pattern kind of repeated. I did start to get a little braver as I went along, sending the books that I'd written out, but I never fully believed in them. And it took a long time for me to realize that actually you have to send it to more than a couple of agents, and it's a very subjective business. I think especially as when I started out, there wasn't so much information available on the internet as there is now. I didn't really have, social media was not a thing, so I couldn't connect to other writers. So I was very much in my bubble, not knowing what was the right thing to do. And what changed for me was, well, a few things changed for me. One of the main things was actually COVID, when I was on lockdown, and it was a time that a lot of us changed our a lot of us were reassessing our priorities, right? And first of all, we didn't leave the house because I live with someone vulnerable. So for 4 months, we did not go out at all. I was fortunate to be able to work from home, and not socializing meant I had a lot more time to write. And I said to myself, at the same time, I had recently turned 40, and that's another sort of moment when a lot of us start looking at our lives. And I was like, you know what, I need to write a book that I feel that I really believe in, and I need to query it properly. I need to send it to more than one agent or 2 agents. So that's what I did. And during the year that I was querying, I also entered it into a competition called the Future Worlds Prize, which is a UK-based competition for science fiction and fantasy writers of colour. And whilst I was querying, I was also shortlisted for that competition. I did sign with my agent just before the competition announcement happened, and I won that competition, so that was amazing. So the main thing for me, the main change was trying to force myself out of my comfort zone and believe in myself more than I had up until that point. So that is basically my writing journey in a nutshell.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, all I can say is kudos, first of all, the perseverance and the flexibility, being able to pivot when you see something perhaps isn't working, and you do more research and you realize, okay, maybe this, if I go in this direction. And congratulations, of course, on winning the competition as well. So one thing that I don't think we explore perhaps enough when I talk to authors, especially authors traditionally published, is that whole agent to author mix, because it's somewhat of a marriage, I would think. Like, you have to find the right fit, right? You have to fit them, they have to fit you. How does that work?
So I think, we hear this a lot about how it is kind of like a marriage. It's not. I mean, it is a business arrangement, but it also really isn't, because ultimately your agent has to love your work, and they have to be able to advocate for it in a very competitive market. So you need someone that really believes in you and that you feel really comfortable with, and that you can be your most vulnerable self with. For me, when I was chatting to my agent, when we were discussing my book, and at the moment I knew like she was the one, and this is where it also sounds like a marriage, the moment I knew she was the one was when she said something about loving cities, and I also love cities, and she's like, I love fantasy cities, and I was like, oh, because cities do not get very good representation in fantasy fiction. Let's just say they're not usually presented in a really positive light, and when she said that, I was like, yeah man, she's the one. So I think it needs to be someone that really loves your writing first and foremost, and that you are comfortable with and feel like you're on a wavelength with. And that can be a difficult thing when you're on the outside of it and you feel like, I just really want an agent. And there's a bit of wisdom that says, no agent is better than a bad agent. And that is 100% true. I've learned having more writer friends, because I have friends who have not been treated well by their agents, and it can really stall their career. So that's why there also needs to be a large element of trust in the relationship as well, I think. So someone that you trust and that is on your wavelength. And I say all this, and I know how hard it is when you're trying to find an agent, and it's like you hear these things, but they don't actually. When you're trying to get an agent, they're hard to sort of absorb. But yeah, and that's how the relationship is. So.
Well, I have to say, huge congratulations, well deserved, because it's that I think there's a catch-22. Of course, I'm not traditionally published. I've never been agented, but and there's catch-22 where you certainly deserve to have an agent because you're a brilliant writer. At the same time, there's a lot of brilliant writers who never latch onto an agent, and it's a bit like winning the lottery.
Yeah.
And the same goes for the next step in the public process. You can have a brilliant agent. You yourself could be a fabulous writer. However, for whatever reasons, you can't find an organization that will buy the book. So how was that part of the process for you? Because, and I want to quickly, before I go there, now, we all hear things about fantasy that, now in the tertiary publishing world, chunky fantasies are no-go. They're not picking, they're putting authors on these crazy restrictive word counts. This is still a nice chunky boy. So 600-ish pages-ish. So how was it in terms of getting your book sold to?
Oh my God! So I'll try not to give like a 2-hour lecture on that question because there's so much I could say. The first bit of what you said about the good writers, and this is something that querying writers will always say to them over and over: not getting an agent, not getting a book deal is not a reflection on your skill as a writer whatsoever. There are brilliant writers who do not have agents, who do not have book deals. Ultimately, these are businesses, and that's part of how the decisions are made. I mean, I know the next stage along when you have an agent and are trying to get a book deal. I know of editors who have loved books but have not been able to get them agreed to, because when an editor likes your work, they then have to take it to an acquisitions meeting, and in the acquisitions meeting there are salespeople, there are marketing people, and they all have a say in what happens. So yeah, brilliant writers do not get picked up. Some brilliant writers do not want to get picked up because they want to write what they want to write. And I do think, there are trends in traditional publishing and there are restrictions, which brings us to the word count thing. So yeah, I don't know how I got away with it, to be honest with you, because when I was querying, I mean, so I queried the book, it was slightly shorter than it is now. So it was about 150,000 words. Now, I did not realize when I started querying, there are some agents who will not look at anything over a certain word count, and that word count is often about 120,000 words. So already I was on, I was at a disadvantage. And then what you were referring to about restrictive word counts from publishers, yeah, I have heard that there are some imprints that now have an upper limit for what they're willing to publish. Now I know that part of it is to do with, I'm told, the cost of paper. Part of it is to do with shelf space. So like where my chunky baby sits on a bookshelf in a bookshop, they could be 2 svelte, lean babies instead. So, from the bookshop's point of view, they get 1 hit of money as opposed to 2 hits of money. So there's all these things come into it. I think I was very lucky because there is definitely a trend to, in my opinion, what I observe is a trend to shorter books. And, because it is what I would class as quite traditional epic fantasy in a lot of ways, those books tend to have a longer word count. And I feel lucky that I was able to tell the type of story that I wanted to tell, because I don't see how I could have done it in a lesser word count, to be honest with you. And all of it is quite hard to, all of it is quite weird because there are readers who love chunky books. They're looking out for chunky books. So, there's still a market for it. So yeah, I think I was very lucky. I feel very well supported by the imprints that are publishing my work. The second book is actually even longer, and yeah, I'm still getting away with it. Don't tell anyone, keep it quiet.
Wow. Well, I love it because it's good. Because again, the work is fantastic. I just want to quickly put up there. Hey, Crossbone Skull says hi. Thanks for coming out to support MH and saying hello. We appreciate it. And another brilliant author, the amazing Timothy Wolf. Hey, Timothy, thanks for coming by to say hi to MH. Check out Timothy's work. He is a brilliant indie author himself, and he says hello. Happy Sunday. Thanks for coming out. So, and now I'm wondering, just out of curiosity, does it have anything to do with, for example, Saga Press? So Brian Lee Durfee, who wrote the Five Warrior Angels, he is also published with Saga Press. I'm looking at some of the authors that are published, and they write chonky fantasy, right? Does the fact that a publisher is willing to be less, restrictive with some of those word counts, does that play into anything? If you get certain publishers that they're just not willing to go with something that's a bit bigger, does that have anything to do with it?
I think there are definitely certainly who one would approach with one's agent, that would play into it for sure, because there are definite trends. I don't to speak carefully here, but there are definite trends within prints in terms of what they want word count wise, and length of series wise as well is another thing, in terms of number of books. You want to, I mean, it's again the agent to editor thing is very similar. It's, you've got to find an editor who really loves your work, and they have they have tastes. They have their things that they like and things they don't like, and your agent would hopefully know the tastes of the various editors that they're sending the book to. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but definitely I think in terms of which imprints, you do observe that some imprints are more, have a little bit of this vibe or that vibe, and then more open to longer works. So I think so.
Absolutely. Just trying to get a handle on the process itself. So from the time you got the book deal to the time the book came out, approximately how much time had passed, and is it somewhat nerve-wracking waiting to see? I know sometimes basically there's a publication queue in terms of certain authors, and when certain authors' works are released, whether a debut author versus an author with quite a body of work with that publisher. But in the meantime, was the process difficult in terms of the waiting for the actual book to come out? And obviously you're going through runs of editing, you're doing different things, you're promoting the book. However, was that one of the most difficult periods of the writing, just actually the waiting?
I mean, so for me, hands down, the most difficult period was actually trying to get a book deal when I had an agent and I knew that she had sent it to editors and I was waiting to hear back. That was horrific for me. It was worse than querying. Is horrific, because you feel so close, and it's very, very common for authors not to sell books. It happens all the time. That was the worst part for me. But so from getting my book deal until the book came out, it was just under 2 years. And the announcement was about, about 5-6 months after the deal came, the public announcement. So there was that period of 5 to 6 months where I had a book deal, but it wasn't public, so I couldn't talk about it. And then once it had been announced, there was a period of roughly 18 months between the announcement and the book coming out. Now, it is nerve-wracking because the whole time you're thinking, how is my book going to be received, so on and so forth. But I actually valued that time because it was this sort of bubble that I'm never going to be in again, where I had the security of knowing my book was going to be published traditionally, but it wasn't yet. So I didn't have all these opinions or a sales record or all the things that can stress you out. And during that period, I wrote the majority of the second book. And that I think was a really good thing because I didn't have any voices in my head saying, your book's trash, or, any weight of expectation. Your book is amazing. And then, oh my God, I'm going to let this person down with book 2, aren't I? All these kind of things that it doesn't matter whether it's good or bad. Somehow most of us find a way to stress about it. So actually I did appreciate it. It does feel like a long time, and yet, like a lot of things, it feels like a long time until it doesn't, and then it all happens really fast. So
I completely understand how that must feel. But I mean, at the same time, you were quite an accomplished writer before you published your first novel, especially in the short fiction world. Some of your short fiction, again, very acclaimed.
Thank you.
You know, and you know, I know you're modest, but you know, the Walls have been in City,
Yeah.
and you know that was longlisted for an award as well, the BSFA award. So can you tell us a bit about your life as a short fiction writer? I don't want to say prior to becoming a novelist, because I'm sure you will continue probably to write short fiction, but can you tell us about some of the things that you've written in the short fiction world and where they've been
For sure.
published?
So for a long time, again, this is a real self-sabotage thing, and you know, we talk a lot about don't self-reject, and I probably could like write a whole thesis on it, because for a long time I thought, oh my gosh, I can never write short fiction. It's a very different skill from long form fiction. It's not something I can do. And you know, I really wish that I had not told myself that for so many years, because first of all, I can, as it turns out, write short fiction, and secondly, I think it really helps my confidence as a writer to start writing short fiction. So I wish I had got to it sooner. So how I kind of got into writing short fiction was the website Strange Horizons, which you may know, is quite a well-known online zine. It's brilliant. They publish short fiction. They also do amazing reviews. I read their website all the time, read it for like years, and I can't remember, I think I saw on Twitter they were saying they were looking for copy editors, and I'd worked as a copy editor in the past, and I was like, well, you know what, I'm sitting reading all this stuff anyway, I may as well volunteer for that. So I started copy editing for Strange Horizons, and I was reading the short fiction as part of that. And as I was reading more short fiction, my brain was sort of starting to think about how to put together a short story, and I was like, actually, maybe I should try this. So again, I said to myself, all right, look, you have an idea of what works and doesn't work as short fiction, so you should go out and do it. The other thing that helped me was FIYAH Literary Magazine, which is a speculative fiction magazine for Black writers. When they came into existence, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel seen. And you know, it's amazing what seeing a place for yourself when you've spent many years not seeing a place for yourself can do for your confidence. So it was that combination of things that made me think, you know what, I need to do this. And you know, because I have so many ideas, you know what it's like as a writer, you are not short of ideas, you're short of time and energy. Those are the two things that hold you back. So I was like, I can get some of these other ideas out. So that's how I started doing it, and I just started sending stories out. And I got my first sales at the same time. One was to FIYAH Literary Magazine, and it was actually a short story set in the same universe as A Song of Legends Lost, called The Tech Work Horse. And then at the same time, I sold something to Daily Science Fiction, which is a online flash magazine. It's actually, I think, not publishing at the moment, but I sold a story to them at the same time. And then the rest is kind of history. I just kept going, and I am trying to find a way to keep going with the short fiction whilst writing the books, because I miss writing short stories. It is a different skill, but it's a very satisfying one. I do have something coming out which I can't talk about yet. It's next year, I think, which is exciting. But apart from that, I haven't been submitting recently, so I need to get back into that. So yeah, and that's my short fiction life.
Okay, well, I mean, it's quite a successful short fiction career. As I said, it's not over, obviously, but and excited to hear you have something new coming up. Can't wait when you're able to share it. Can't wait to hear about that. And I do totally agree. I was, you know, it's so funny. You echo my sentiments about short fiction. I was asked to write for an anthology. I didn't think I could do it, because how am I going to write? I'm this person who writes these big, chalky novels, you know, like you. How am I going to write something that's 10,000 words or less? But I think it really helped my development as a writer, you know, being concise and a bunch of other skills that, as you said, you work on when you write short fiction. So I totally agree with you. That said, now, you're right. You are writing now these big, beautiful, chunky novels, and um, now I know perhaps more in the indie sphere, and not in the trad sphere too, because I think novellas are coming more popular. I'm thinking of someone like Shauna Lawless, who her popular Gale song series. She's got quite a few novellas out now. Do you think there could be novellas in this universe?
Definitely. I have a whole bunch planned out. I just many times someone says, "Have you got this? Have you got that?" I'm like, "Yeah, I've got that. I've already got 10,000."
Okay.
Yeah, I would love to write some novellas set in that universe. There are a couple. I mean, to be honest, talking about the life of this or the evolution of this particular book, I had written probably one or two totally different versions of what became A Song of Legends Lost, and I shed a lot of words, and I shed a whole arc that was because it was basically all flashbacks that I would love to have as a novella. And then there's a very minor character who kind of I would love to write about their backstory as well. So yeah, if I get the opportunity, I would absolutely love to do that. I'm not sure what form that would take, like in terms of how it would be published, but I hope to do that for sure. I intend to do that one way or another at some point.
Oh, okay, that's exciting news. That's exciting news. Now, you mentioned that you had a previous life as a copy editor. So, how did that affect especially your writing journey, and especially your knowledge of the business side of writing as a copy editor? What impact did that have on?
So the copy editing I did was it was a very long time ago, and it was magazine copy editing, and also online. I worked for a online games review website back in the day when games review websites were everything that they are now, and I did copy editing for that. So that was my copy editing experience. It was not a lot. It was a couple of years off and on. I mean, it taught me a lot about precision and accuracy. I don't know that I saw much of the business side because magazines and online like games is a very different field to book publishing, but it certainly helped me understand some of the decisions that go into that side of editing, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's no such thing as bad experience or bad knowledge when it comes to life. Every little thing that you do in your life, I think, could potentially contribute to your experiences down the road. But it sounds like you have this well-rounded background, and now you're, successful novelist, great debut. So, do you think there's more pressure when you have a great debut like this and Sunday Times bestseller and sell well, and then now, because I know for me, I'm not saying I'm in this class, I'm saying imposter syndrome for me with book 2 was definitely tough. You have these expectations of people that like your book, you're looking to please them. The ones that had issues with certain things, you're looking to improve and demonstrate you've improved. But you said that you spent some of the time writing book 2, that you're waiting for book 1 to be released. But how was that journey writing the second book in this series? And was there any potential imposter syndrome, what we like to call imposter syndrome, just that fear of expectations?
I mean,
perhaps?
I get massive imposter syndrome. But one thing I realized that helped me was going to bookish events and encountering other bookish people. It's just a bunch of introverts who all have imposter syndrome, and we're all walking around just being really like, I mean, obviously you get we all know there's certain people who certainly don't have imposter syndrome and have a lot of entitlement. We can all name people like that, but for the most part, I think, because of what you were saying earlier about how it feels a little bit like a lottery sometimes, certain aspects of the the traditionally published route. So there's a bunch of us like, I can't actually believe I'm here. Am I supposed to be here? Did they mix my name up? It goes on a lot, So then that is a struggle. And then the other side of what you were saying in terms of the expectation that you have when people do like what you've written, Yeah, I mean, I have that massively, and I'm also a little bit of a people pleaser. I bought myself a whole book. It's called what's it called? It's called Are You Mad at Me? I think it's called. I haven't started it yet, but it's about being a people pleaser and how to like not let it rule your life. And I think up until this point in my life, I had got away with just trying to please everyone, and it's not always a healthy thing. And like one of the things that I personally for me has been a bit of a learning curve is like you are not gonna no there are gonna be people who do not like your book at all. And even if you
Yes,
stay away
yes,
from reviews, which I mostly managed
yeah,
to do,
yeah.
sort of, you are still going to know that they exist. There's still that information is
Yeah.
still going to come to you. You can do nothing about it. And then if you're a sort of perfectionist, which I also am, and a people pleaser, that can really mess with your mind. Um, so I'm trying. Sort of it's a good experience for me because I think it will strengthen me as a person to deal with this and realize that no, you just have to have faith in yourself and what you want. There will be people that like what you want to do. There'll be people that don't, and the book is not, the book is not for them. That's what it comes down to. It's this doesn't mean the book is wrong. It just means it wasn't for them, and that's fine. And then with book two, for the majority of book two, I didn't have that over my head because book one wasn't out. And although I was getting, blurbs and so on, I didn't have many reader opinions for the majority of that. I did think, oh my God, can I pull this off again? Because you always think that when you start a book, don't you? I also was a lot of the story of book two had existed for a long time in my head, so that made it easier. Book three is the whole journey that I'm on right now. So this is the real. People talk about book two, the second book being the hardest one. For me, I think it is going to be book three.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, of course, I know for me, I am usually looking forward to book two and beyond. So I'm happy that you were able to write book two largely without being bogged down by that the lack of confidence, etc. And you have no reason because again, this book is established. But I do want to get into the book itself. So I'll just give you a bit of my personal thought process and where my head was going when I met you and I saw the book cover. So I immediately got and not just because you're a Black author and not just because I got the Evan Winter Rage of Dragons vibes, right? So I saw this cover. I'm like, okay. And again, your work is very unique. It's original. It's not like Evan's. But one thing that I did find that was a comparator was how you deal to some degree. It's not the same, but with a class, with a class struggles, and and very much so, and how the you have the low bloods, which essentially like a peasant class, right? And they're trying to just survive, right, in this world, and based on their place in the hierarchy, in the social hierarchy. So I do want to talk about the word more broadly, but was that something very intentional? You have these noble families, and you have the peasants, and there's very great delineation between these systems. Was that something very, very intentional that you want to focus on thematically?
Yeah, 100%. And I'm a big Evan Winter fan. I love Rage of Dragons and book two as well. And his approach to class in that, which is similar in that there's the two, basically effectively two classes. So yeah, it was intentional for sure because I come from a working class background and I've always read fantasy since I was really young, and in general in fantasy working class people are not portrayed in a very positive light. If they are portrayed in a positive light, they don't have much agency. And I know that people will say, like, a lot of fantasy, especially epic fantasy, is pseudo historical, right? Even if the setting is not overtly, you know, tied to a real world version. It's still pseudo historical. We're still basing it a lot of times on kings and queens setup and so on. So, you know, and so people will say, oh, you know, but that history was written by the nobility. And actually, yes, history is written by the nobility, but poorer people had a lot of power. You know, we know that now from, you know, a civilization can be, for example, we had a massive bin strike, so rubbish bin strike in this country in a certain city recently, and it really affects everyone's lives at every level, right? A society only functions when all people within it are playing their part. So it's a fallacy to say that poorer people don't have power. It's just that they don't have as much overt power. So yeah, I wanted to portray characters from working class backgrounds, just their lives in a not always negative light, because yeah, being poor sucks, right? But it doesn't suck the whole time unless you are in grinding poverty, you know. And I think there's you know, there are no nuance. Well, there are no nuances. We rarely get nuanced views of what it's like. So it was intentional on my part, partly because of my own background, partly because, I mean, we've been so notorious for being obsessed with class, and it's kind of true, I think. You know, owing to the fact that we have a functioning monarchy, probably, and, you know, and our colonial history as well. So yeah, it was intentional, and I will continue to always have working class perspectives in whatever I write.
Yeah, and I thought it was brilliantly done, and you highlighted that yes, you know, unless you're in, you're being trodden underfoot, you know, in inescapable and oppressive poverty. There's happiness, and there's moments of joy. Especially you depicted, I think, the joy of family and the close familiar relationships, and you know how your loved ones can really support you and uplift you and make you feel good even in the worst of times. I thought that was so well done in your book, with in terms of, you know, what the poor classes were undergoing. But you also have, you know, you have heroes in all of the different elements of the social structure, and you know, but one of the things I also loved about your book, and I want to give you a chance to kind of give the whole pitch yourself, but I definitely want to highlight this, was that, you know, you had characters who were very much, I talk about family, they were burdened by the weight of their legacy, of their predecessors, their parents, you know, and they felt they could never live to that. And I thought that was also really well done. Was that also very intentional in terms of
Yeah, so there's this particular character, probably the one you're thinking of, yeah, who certainly is surrounded by very competent people and feels less competent and accomplished themselves. Into that, I was channeling a lot of my own sense of, you know, as someone that has struggled with confidence, I could put a lot of my own thought processes into that character. I also wanted to do a bit of a spin on a reluctant hero, which I know we all sort of love a reluctant hero, but a lot of times they're reluctant because they don't want to shoulder these big momentous things, but actually they're very competent people. So I wanted a reluctant hero who has to kind of learn on their feet a little bit. And, you know, for a long time, the character that occupied that space was very different. It was much more of a traditional, you know, competent warrior and so on. And only when I started thinking about, they were always looked down upon by the people around them, and only when I started delving into that, I was like, actually, you know what? If this person, their whole life has been put down, they're probably going to be lacking in confidence. And I wanted a less confident character for sure. Yeah, and that was a conscious thing.
And again, it was so well done. Quickly, I want to put up the fabulous Max Garfield is here. Mac, greetings, salutations. Thanks for coming out and supporting MH Max, a great member of the community, always, so intelligent and insightful. Mac, if you haven't picked this up, something to add to your TBR, Song of Legends Lost. So, Matt is a very discerning reader. So, hopefully he adds that to TBR if it's not on there already. I think you'd enjoy it. So I'm going to give you an opportunity, if you don't mind, MH, for you to basically frame and give us an idea of what A Song of Legends Lost is about and what the series is about.
This is a question that all writers dread and we're all terrible at. What is your book about? Song of Legends Lost is a big, sprawling, epic fantasy set in a world where the nobility, possibly, can summon their ancestors to fight in battle. In this world, there are these creatures called Greybloods who are monsters of a type, and the people who summon their ancestors, who are known as invokers, are basically trying to stop raids and attacks by the Greybloods. Then within that, there are characters who have come into, let's just say, possession's probably quite a good word, something that is like an ancestor of their own that they are bonded to, and it is about what happens when the king calls a big draft to push back the Greybloods, for reasons that become more apparent in book 2. And it is about these characters managing the powers that they have come into, or dealing with the responsibilities that are placed upon their shoulders. It's got 5 main points of view. It has 3 epilogues, which are my favorite part of the book. You have to read them. It is written very much in the tradition of the 80s and 90s fantasies that I sort of loved to read when I was younger. Not so much in the setting, which is based on a number of different pre-colonial cultures, but in terms of the vibes of the book that I was trying to create. And then in the background of all of that is this lost civilization that was super advanced and is now extinct, and the remnants of that civilization remain. They are called tech work, and it becomes clear pretty quickly that they are analogous to our technology, and possibly technology slightly more advanced than we have in our society right now. And I don't know if that made any sense, but that is what the book is kind of about.
That was a fabulous pitch, as only an author can do about their own work. I love series where you get teased with bits and pieces of what might be hiding behind the curtain, but you don't get them all right away. And that's one thing that I love about your book. You mentioned the advanced technology that seems to be linked to a world that's analogous to our own. How do you feel as an author about, obviously, especially with series, some aspects of the world you don't necessarily reveal right away, and that comes later in successive books. Do you enjoy the holding things back, and then later on, people are like, oh, that was what that was about? Do you enjoy that aspect of writing?
I enjoy the aspect of reading. So therefore, when you write, you're trying to recreate the pleasure that you had. It's really sweet, actually, when you think about it. You're trying to recreate the pleasure you had as a reader or whatever, consumer of a story, and give it to someone else. That's essentially what we're trying to do, which is a really nice thing when you think about it. So yeah, I love those type of stories, and so I wanted to recreate that. I can't say I always love recreating that, because it takes a lot of work and a lot of thought, but the results for me are, satisfying. Not all readers like that. I like a lot of ambiguity and mystique in what I read, because I'm the sort of person that likes to reread things, although I don't get to do that much anymore. I like having layers in the stories that I consume, so I like being able to puzzle things out. So yeah, I wanted to create something like that, and I also like the reader to be able to bring their own interpretation, and also a bit of a puzzle, putting the pieces together and then thinking, oh yeah, I get it now. I like, as a reader, to do that, and I wanted to give my readers the opportunity to do that. But it's a delicate balancing act between being too mysterious, and it is a matter of taste. You know, I have read, I don't want to say which books, but you know, I've read books that are maybe too ambiguous for a lot of people, but I don't mind, and that's a matter of taste. Yeah.
Do you feel it's a book that the book that you read, is it a book where like you're talking about books that you feel like you're thrown in the deep end? When you say that, with what comes to mind is Malaz and Book of the Fallen, David Erickson. I think for those who, it's a very popular series. For those who read it, you feel you start with when you're like, what's going on? Who's this? What does this mean? And you just have to follow your way through it. I didn't find your book to be that drastic, but I did like the ambiguity about certain things, like what's really going on here. Not really sure, you know. And but but the difference between your book and certainly Malazan is that things certainly come together, become more clear. Early on in the book, you get a sense, which I found very comforting, because you know I didn't feel like I wasn't intelligent enough to figure it out. But again, it's also because of your writing skill and how well that was. And then obviously Erickson's a brilliant writer too. I'm not saying that he's not. That's just the style.
Yeah.
But with your book, I definitely felt a sense of mystery, and that was what pervaded for me throughout the. So, and I assume that also was intentional. You're trying to create. It was very mysterious about. I mean, we start off with a priest. Right away, you're kind of wondering about the magic system, about what's going on behind the scenes, like. So that was all intentional, I would assume.
Yeah. So the other side of it is I see this as my like decolonizing my own mind book, and also these characters going through the same process, because it is a little bit of a spoiler to say, but the book is about colonialism, and what that looks like, and you know the fact that civilizations had their history ripped away from them, all their art and culture. What wasn't ripped away from them told it wasn't theirs, and that is basically what this book is about. And I think, you know, all the characters go through the process of finding out about their history and their background, which I feel is something that we who have grown up under colonialism, which is all of us if we live in any country that was once part of the British Empire, live in the UK itself, you know, we have grown up under colonialism. It's not over. It still affects every aspect of our lives and of the structure of society that we live within. And so it was intentional for that as well. Thematically, the book is about stolen history and the process of recovering that, and the loss of identity and reclaiming your own identity that comes with that. And that is something that the characters do, but it's also something that I feel I've needed to do as a Black British person. And you know, so that was part of it as well. And then what you were saying about Malazan, I feel like I think the thing with Malazan is all the information is there. It's just you're giving it all at once, so you have to piece it together. Like with my book, I think like you don't have all the information. It's slowly given to you. With Malazan, it's like, here's all the information, you put the puzzle together, and then it's like sink or swim. I always think about it. We had this when I was growing up, we had this really scary swimming teacher in this really like Victorian unheated pool. It was the most terrifying part of my schooling as a kid, and he took us all to the deep end on the first lesson. He put a pole, I mean they would never do this nowadays, put a pole across the deep end of this unheated pool in this like crumbling Victorian building. He's like, right, everyone has to dive over the pole. And I remember standing there thinking, I'm going to crack my head on the pole. I'm going to crack my head and like drown in the pool. But I managed to dive. This was, I should say, it was for people that could swim, but like none of us had dived over a pole before. And I managed it. And I feel like Malazan's a bit like that. It's like, go, you know, I'm gonna drop you in, you go, swim. And you know, it's I haven't read all of the books, but I am a Malazan fan. I love those worlds, and part of the gift of those books to me is the fact that I don't know everything to start with, and I will glean more by rereading, and you know, it feels like genuine history, because history doesn't have a start and end point.
Yes.
You know, you can choose where to find out about a part of about like a certain part of history. You can choose to find out about this era, but it's always dependent on things that have gone before it. Those things have affected it, and you will never get to the end of it when you're trying to piece together, different aspects of the world. So I feel like Malazan is a bit like that. So that's what is one of the most brilliant things about it, I think, is it feels like a genuine piece of history.
Yes, absolutely. But so did yours. Your book definitely felt like that. And the theme of colonialism, I mean, it's a theme that's near and dear to my heart. I write about that in my books. I write a series about colonialism from the viewpoint of the oppressor, from the colonizer.
Yeah.
Right? And now with your books, the one that I've read so far, I can definitely also say that, the characters find different ways as they struggle with uncovering, these essentially these secrets about their own history and what's been overwritten and suppressed, and it's a colonial flavor. I mean, name your empire. It predates, certainly any modern history we have. You go back and whether it's the Incas or the Roman Empire or again the British Empire. Pick your empire. The playbook is the same for the most part, at least initially, in terms of writing over other cultures and dominating them and in some cases eradicating that culture's history. Do you think that, I guess, and this is something that I struggle with, and I love when it's expressed through literature, because it's something we can approach it from the lens of, okay, this is a fantasy novel, but I wonder, if this is something that we're still going to be writing about in 1,000 years because the playbook remains the same.
Yeah, my God. So I hope not. I fear we will, if we're still here, if we haven't totally destroyed our atmosphere. Yeah, there are certainly patterns when what you're referring to in terms of empires. Without getting too heavy, I think the difference we have now is that the legacy of colonialism that we are living in is intrinsically tied to capitalism, and that may be the thing that we look back on in 1,000 years and are looking at how that has harmed us in the way that we currently look back at colonialism and the way that has harmed us. The two are now very intertwined, as they have been for quite a few hundred years, to be honest. Yeah, I think there are some, I don't want to say essential truths because that sounds really bad, but there is something that we as a species need to get over in terms of subjugating each other and trying to stamp out individuality and so on. And I hope we move away from it, but yeah, things come in cycles, don't they? So I don't know.
And yet so much fantasy literature is about that very subject. So much fantasy literature is about conquest and colonial empires and either denigrated or idolized in a way, right? But very interesting. We want to put up Mac because he's such a well-read fellow. This is some of the stuff that he's been up to in terms of his reading. Norse sagas, reading about Willem II. What else has he been up to? He says Tolkien. He's talking about the wizards. Yes. He's reading LA Confidential, and he loves the film adaptation. He's been also reading that. Interesting. Yeah, Max is such an interesting personality. So, you have written book 2 in this series, and you're on to book 3. Are you able to give away how many books in the series? Is the plan? Is it kind of decided?
Yeah, it's going to be 3 books. So book 3 will be the final book. I'm not saying that I'm not going to write in this universe again, no, for sure. As I've said, I would love to write some novellas, but I would also like to do other things in this universe. I should say that the universe that this is set in, I created it when I was really young. I don't even want to say how many years ago, but it was a long time ago. And I wrote things in different eras of this universe. So it has a big history. and I would love to explore other regions in this universe and other eras of history. In terms of specifics of what is coming up in books 2 and 3, book 2 is a little bit darker. You learn a lot more about the Grey Bloods. It has a lot more battle in it. There's a massive siege, and book 3, how can I say much about book 3 without spoilers? I don't know that I can. Not every character makes it to book 3. I'm just going to say that. But I'm not going to say which characters don't. Maybe some characters come back that aren't in book 2.
Oh, okay.
What else can I say without being spoilery? I think that's probably it. But yeah, it's book 2 is a lot more action based, much more about the Grey Bloods, more about the families, which are the basically organized crime syndicates that are also present in the book. And yeah, it's got some pretty sad bits as well. I'll just say it's quite difficult to write.
Okay, well, I am definitely looking forward to this. Looking forward to delving into books 2 or 3 when they come out. So, in terms of some of your writing influences, so what are some of the books and or authors that really are part of your inspirations that made you want to write brilliant epic fantasy?
So I will say it is a lot of writers, and there are writers who I felt gave me permission to write the things I want to write. Like, for example, you were talking about Evan Winter. I mean, I had written the majority of this book, but before I read The Rage of Dragons, but it really, I love that book, and it really validated my own things that I wanted to do, and then the same with N.K. Jemisin, who is a huge inspiration to me. I often cite the Broken Earth trilogy as a big inspiration for this series. Again, a lot of it was in place because I've been writing in this universe for a long time. A lot of it was in place before I read the Broken Earth books, but again, there are aspects of it that I thought, I can actually do this. I can pull it off and people will read it, or I can attempt to pull it off, and I can write at this scale. And there's an element of that series, especially towards the end, where you learn about the advanced history of that world that I really loved, and that helped me. And then further back than that, I often talk about Lord of the Rings when Aragorn summons the army of the dead. That it was part of the inspiration for the invoking. The other inspiration, which I always talk about, is Final Fantasy, the series of video games, and the summons in that. And the way originally it was actually creatures that were summoned, and even though I wanted to channel that Aragorn thing as well, but the way that when I started thinking about the disparate cultures that I was pulling together for this book, and I was thinking one thing that a lot of pre-colonial cultures had in common was ancestor veneration. I was like, this is like, okay, that's weird. That's how I was like, oh, it's ancestors, because so yeah, the Lord of the Rings. I talk about the Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe a lot. If we're talking about ambiguity, that's the king of ambiguity. I love those books. I think I understood about 40% of what was happening in them. I love the way things that we recognize are slowly revealed to us. We can slowly, that's what that thing is. I love the crumbling ancient feel of the setting. I also love the prose. The Dune books, I should say Dune as well. Another series that was foundational to me growing up. And there's the Butlerian Jihad, where there's no machines, and that was an element of this book as well, in terms of the technology basically being outlawed. And then there's another science fiction book called Eon by Greg Bear, which I'm not sure if you've read, and I won't say how it influenced this because it's a little bit of a spoiler, but it's to do with the wider universe of this book. But there are so many others that I can't think of off the top of my head. Oh, I will say one more thing without giving a massive speech about the hundreds of influences I have. The Studio Ghibli films, particularly Nausicaa and the Valley of the Wind, and Castle in the Sky, both of which feature sort of technologically advanced pasts. Nausicaa in particular, there is a toxic forest in that humans can't enter, which was a big inspiration for the home of the Grey Bloods, which is supposed to be inhospitable to humans. Castle in the Sky, especially some of the aesthetics. Anyone who's not familiar with that film, there's a legendary technologically advanced civilization that is supposedly on this floating island, and when, spoiler, it's found, there are these ancient robots that have like birds' nests on them, and the fusion of technology with nature was another big influence for certain aspects of this series. And that's where I'll stop talking because I could go on all night.
Well, no, you've given us some fabulous recs as well. How has African culture, especially your Nigerian heritage, how has that affected or inspired your work?
So I wanted the parts of Nigerian culture that I felt most deeply, I wanted those to be present in the book. One of them is this, particularly, the most important one to me was the multi-generational living, which is not peculiar to Nigerian culture whatsoever. It's very common to other cultures as well, and it's something that, alas, I feel would benefit us, all over. Aspects of food and certainly weapons. Clan Adatali is the clan that is an amalgam of various West African cultures and some Southern African cultures as well. I pulled from a lot of them. Part of that is to do with the story and the way in which these cultures have been reduced by, spoiler, the colonial entity. But I wanted the Nigerian elements to be foremost in that because of my own heritage, because I would have loved growing up to have read fantasy set in a Nigerian inspired setting, and I just did not have access to that. I am going to shout out Michael Anderson's book Firstborn of the Sun, which I'm reading at the moment, and it's coming out this month. And if you want something that is completely infused with Yoruba culture, that's the book to read. It's amazing, and it is quite an emotional reading experience for me, because I'm like, all these little aspects, I'm a person of mixed heritage, all the aspects of my Nigerian side that I don't even think about, I spotted in this book. I was like, oh gosh, I forgot about this. Oh gosh, I don't even think about that, because I live in the UK and, I don't often I feel that I have as much access to that side of my heritage as I would like. So that book is something to look out for, because the cultural influences in my book are sprinkling rather than actually based on this thing. So I wanted the vibes of many cultures that have impacted my life, including my own Yoruba heritage, in the book, because that is what I would have loved to have read growing up and would love to continue reading now.
Wow, that is incredible. So you mentioned a couple books that now these are current authors that are perhaps the books being released. What are some of the books you've read recently from authors in the last few years that are standout to you, or that you want to shout out that you think are fantastic?
Oh God, so many. And after I say this, I'm going to be like, why didn't I say this person? I should have said that person. So yeah, I would say pick up that book when it comes out. A couple of Nigerian authors that I also love: Davies Okunbawa, his series. The first one is Son of the Storm. Those books are amazing. Also, massively Nigeria influenced. Toby Ogundiran, who writes short fiction as well. His short fiction is amazing. He's got a epic fantasy novella duology. I think the first one is called In the Shadow of the Fall. That's really good. Then more broadly, I love Andrea Stewart's books. The most recent one, oh my gosh, the most recent one, The Gods Below, which is the opening of a new trilogy. That's the opening pages of that. Oh, especially as a parent, I was like, oh, I need to lie down after reading that. It's got one of the most arresting is not the right word. It's got a very dramatic opening. Speaking of dramatic openings, Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse, which has a really, really dramatic, I'm just going to say opening. It's got one of the most traumatic openings I've ever read. I think the series just won the Hugo Award.
Yeah.
Tasha Sori's work as well. She's got a new book coming out soon. I have it sitting over there, called The Isle in the Silver Sea. But I love the Burning Kingdoms trilogy that she wrote. Again, I've said Evan Winter, haven't I? So I love his books. And it's too many authors to name. C.L. Clarke as well, if you want to read about colonialism. The series that begins with The Unbroken, that series is one of the best things I've read about empire and colonialism, because first of all, it shows you about the loss of culture, and secondly, the main character Terrain, one of the main characters, she's someone that has been taken from her colonized home and brought up by the colonizers, effectively, and the way she's pulled in two different directions, I think really resonates with those of us that have multiple cultural influences in our lives. It's another brilliant series. So I'll stop talking there, but there's so many.
I have to get to book 2. Book 1 was fabulous, and I had the privilege of interviewing CL in the past, and I really have to get to book 2. That's a travesty that it happens. So
it's brilliant. The third one's just come out. I'm very scared to read it. Very scared about what's going to happen.
I definitely have to get back to that. Those are some fantastic recs, and for those of you listening who watched us as a replay, check out some of those books. When great authors recommend other authors, they're definitely books that you want to check out. So, well, listen, I know it's getting late there. You've been so generous with your time. I could talk to you for hours, I think, but I want to respect your time. As we're winding down, would you mind telling the audience where people can buy your books, where they can find you, where you lurk on social media, in terms of if they want to interact with you, etc., through an agent or publicist, etc. How do we get in touch and follow MH?
Where to buy my books? Buy my books at your local independent book retailer of choice, or request it at the library if you wish to. They're available in all the usual places, but I always say first and foremost, support your local indie retailers. I'm on almost every social media platform as at Ayinde, my name. I'm probably most active on Blue Sky and Instagram, and a little bit on TikTok. Like, I feel like that meme of "Hi kids" with the skateboards. I'm like this Gen X imposter in the Gen Z space. So if you want to come see a Gen Xer doing my awkward videos, you can come and follow me on TikTok. I have a monthly newsletter if you like. If you want sort of disparate ramblings and me yapping about anime, then sign up to my newsletter, which I send out at the end of each month. That is on my website, which is www.mhayinde.com. So and I'm a little bit terminally online, so that's where you can find me.
That is awesome. MH, I just want to say you're just a bright light, and again, a brilliant author. Can't wait to read more from you. Folks, if you haven't picked up Sunday Times bestselling A Song of Legends Lost and this amazing series, about time you do so. I can't wait to read book 2. Chonky Fantasy is not dead. So just remember, folks, there's still some bigger, thicker books being written that you're going to love. So check out MH Ayinde. Check out her short fiction as well. check out her. If you go to her website, I believe that a lot of her short fiction is listed there. With titles in the magazines in which they've been published. So, thank you to everyone who has come by in the live and everyone who watched on replay. You're what makes this type of long form content amazing. I don't care what anybody says. Long form content is great. And I love getting to sit down with wonderful people such as MH, and it's been so wonderful to chat to you. Quickly, a bit of quick self promo for me as we wrap up the day. I'm PL Stewart, author John King Saga. PLStewart.com is the website. Almost all the social media is at PL Stewart Writes. Series John Kingdom Saga, 5 books out now. 5th one, A Pack of Wolves, just came out in the spring, and book 6, A Black Dragon on Red, is coming in the spring of 2026. Ooh. Also, thank you for spooky season. Check out my story in the Shapers of Worlds anthology. It's entitled Forest Dark. It's fantasy horror, my first foray into short fiction, and of course fantasy horror. It's set in the John King universe. I think I think it's a nice little taster for what to expect from writing. Love to send you an arc of that. There's some great authors in that. Absolutely fabulous authors. MJ Kuhn's in that. Like some really good authors. Some great fiction, African-inspired fiction, European, Baltic-inspired, like just fabulous stuff, right? And I got lucky they picked me for that one. So love to send you an arc if you want to.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. Yes, please. Thank you.
Check that out. And and so thanks again for tuning 6 Elementals, where I get to speak to brilliant authors such as MH. And we'll let her get to the rest of her evening, and we'll sign off. And
thank you so much for having me on. It was really great chatting to you.
Thank you so much for coming, AH. And thanks everyone again for tuning in. Take care now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.